Why is it that the harder you try to break a bad habit, the stronger it seems to become? If you're watching this, chances are you've already tried. You've relied on discipline, forced yourself to quit, promised, "This time will be different," and yet, somehow, you always end up back where you started. Here's the truth no one tells you. The problem was never your willpower. It's the way you've been taught to fight yourself. For years, Kaito lived exactly like this. Every morning he swore he would stop reaching for his phone, stop escaping into distractions, stop losing control over something so small, yet so powerful. And every night, he failed again. He thought he was weak, until one quiet encounter changed everything. A monk once told him something that felt almost insulting in its simplicity. Don't fight your habits. Watch them. At first, it made no sense. How could something so passive defeat something so strong? But what happened next would completely change how Kaito understood control, discipline, and even himself. Because what if your habits aren't your enemies? What if the more you resist them, the more you feed them? And what if there was a way to let them disappear? Without force, without exhaustion, and without this endless cycle of trying and failing. If you've ever felt stuck in that loop, comment 1 below. Because in this video, you're about to see what Kaito discovered, and why everything you thought you knew about change might be backwards. Chapter 1. The Silent Loop. Kaito didn't notice when it started. At first, it was just a small escape. A quick scroll to relax after work. A short break to clear his mind. Something harmless, something normal. But slowly, without warning, it became something else. Every morning he woke up with the same quiet promise. Today will be different. Today he would take control. Today he would focus. Today he would finally break the cycle. And every night, he failed. Hours lost without realizing it. His mind drifting, his attention slipping away, his discipline dissolving into nothing. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't weak. In fact, he tried harder than most. He deleted apps. He set strict rules. He punished himself when he failed. But the harder he pushed, the stronger the pull became. It felt like fighting something invisible, something inside him that always won. One night, after another failed attempt, Kaito sat alone in the dim light of his room, staring at his phone resting on the table. He didn't touch it, but he could feel it, a subtle tension in his chest, a quiet urge building beneath the surface, not loud, not overwhelming, but persistent, like a whisper that refused to disappear. Just one more time. That was the moment something shifted. For the first time, instead of reacting, Kaito paused. He didn't grab the phone. He didn't fight the urge either. He simply sat there and noticed it. The sensation, the restlessness, the thoughts trying to pull him in, and what he discovered in that moment was unsettling. The urge wasn't constant. It moved. It rose, peaked, and then, slowly, began to fade. Kaito frowned, because if the urge could fade on its own, then maybe the problem was never the habit itself. Maybe the problem was how he had been responding to it all along. Chapter 2. The Encounter. The next day, Kaito did something unusual. Instead of trying to fix himself, he left. No plan, no destination, just a quiet need to step away from the noise he had been fighting for so long. His feet carried him through narrow streets, past crowded shops, until the city slowly faded into silence. That's when he found the temple. It wasn't grand or impressive, just a small wooden structure, hidden behind tall trees, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. And yet, something about it made him stop. An old monk was sweeping the ground, slowly, deliberately, each movement complete, as if nothing else in the world existed beyond the rhythm of the broom touching the earth. Kaito stood there for a moment, watching. Then he asked, almost without thinking, "How do you stop something you can't control?" The monk didn't answer right away. He finished his sweep. One stroke, then another. Only when he placed the broom down did he look at Kaito. "You don't," he said calmly. Kaito frowned. "Then how do you change?" The monk studied him, not judging, just observing, the same way Kaito had unknowingly observed his own urge the night before. "Tell me," the monk said, "when the urge comes, what do you do?" "I fight it," Kaito replied. "I try to ignore it. I try to control it. And does it work?" Kaito hesitated. "No, The monk nodded, as if this answer was expected. Then why continue doing the same thing? Silence settled between them. Kaito didn't have an answer. The monk picked up a small cup of tea and placed it gently in Kaito's hands. "Next time it comes," he said softly, "do nothing." Kaito looked confused. "Nothing? Don't fight it. Don't follow it. Just watch." The words felt simple, almost too simple, but something about them stayed with him, because for the first time, someone wasn't telling him to try harder. They were telling him to stop trying altogether. Chapter 3. The first observation. That night, Kaito returned home. But something was different. For the first time, he wasn't preparing to fight. No rules, no restrictions, no promises to himself. Just one simple instruction echoing in his mind. Do nothing. Just watch. At first it felt wrong, almost irresponsible, as if by not resisting, he was already giving up. But still, he waited. Minutes passed. Then it came. That familiar pull, subtle at first, like a quiet shift in the air, then stronger, a growing tension in his chest. His thoughts began to form, almost automatically. Just check for a minute. You deserve a break. It's not a big deal. Kaito felt his body lean slightly forward. This was the moment he would normally react. But this time, he didn't. He stayed still, watching, not trying to stop the thoughts, not trying to push them away, just noticing them as if they didn't belong to him. And something strange began to happen. The urge wasn't solid. It wasn't one continuous force like he had always believed. It came in waves, rising, tightening, reaching a peak where it felt almost unbearable. And then, without warning, it softened. The tension loosened. The thoughts lost their sharpness. The pull weakened, just slightly, but enough. Kaito blinked, because in that moment, he saw something he had never seen before. The urge was not controlling him. He was reacting to it. And by not reacting, something inside the pattern broke. He sat there longer, curious now. Another wave came. Again he watched. Again it rose, peaked, and passed. No force, no struggle, no exhaustion, just awareness. Kaito leaned back slowly. For the first time in years, he hadn't lost. Not because he fought harder, but because he didn't fight at all. Chapter 4. The nature of the wave. The next morning, Kaito returned to the temple. He didn't come with questions this time. He came with curiosity. The monk was there again, sweeping the same ground, with the same quiet precision. Kaito waited until he finished, then spoke. "It fades," Kaito said. "The urge, it disappears if I don't react." The monk nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Of course it does," he replied. "Everything does." Kaito frowned. "It doesn't feel like that. When it's there, it feels permanent." The monk smiled slightly. "Pain feels permanent, fear feels permanent, desire feels permanent, but feeling is not truth." He picked up a small bowl of water and gently tilted it. The surface trembled, forming ripples that spread outward, then slowly became still again. "Your urges are like this," he said. "They move, they change, but you mistake their movement for something solid." Kaito watched the water settle. "Then why do they feel so strong?" he asked. "Because you fight them," the monk answered. Kaito stayed silent. The monk continued. "When you resist a wave, you create tension. That tension makes the wave feel bigger than it is, but when you let it pass, you see its true size." Kaito thought back to the night before. The rising tension, the peak, the fading. It had never lasted. He had just never stayed long enough to see it end. "There is another thing you must understand," the monk said. "You are not the wave." Kaito looked up. "You are the one watching it." The words landed deeper than he expected, because if that was true, then he had never actually been controlled, only convinced that he was. And for the first time, Kaito began to realize freedom wasn't about removing the wave. It was about no longer drowning in it. Chapter 5. The small shift. For the first time in years, Kaito felt a sense of control, but it wasn't the kind he expected. There was no force behind it. No tension. No exhausting battle between what he should do and what he wanted to do, just awareness. But as the days passed, he noticed something else. Even though the urges were weaker, they still came. Not as strong, not as often, but they were still there, waiting for the right moment. Kaito returned to the temple again. "If I can observe the urge," he said, "why does it keep coming back?" The monk placed 2 cups on the ground. One was filled with clear water, the other was empty. "Because you've created space," the monk replied. "But you haven't filled it." Kaito looked confused. The monk continued, "For years, your habit served a purpose. It gave you relief, escape, comfort. When you stop reacting to it, you remove the habit, but the need remains." Kaito stayed silent, letting the words settle. "So what do I do?" he asked. The monk gently poured water from the full cup into the empty one. "You don't remove a pattern," he said. "You replace it." Kaito watched the water flow, "Not with something random," the monk added, "but with something aligned." That night, Kaito decided to try something different. When the urge came, he didn't just sit with it. He observed it, and then he shifted. Instead of reaching for his phone, he stood up, walked slowly, poured himself a cup of tea. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced, just a small change. At first it felt insignificant, almost meaningless. But something subtle began to happen. The urge didn't disappear instantly, but it lost direction. It no longer had a clear path to follow. And over time, that small shift began to grow. Because Kaito realized something most people never do. You don't break habits by destroying them. You outgrow them. One small choice at a time. Chapter 6. The Hidden Need. Days turned into weeks, and Kaito's struggle began to change form. He no longer felt trapped. But something deeper started to reveal itself. The urges weren't random. They came at specific moments. Late at night, when the room was too quiet, after long hours of work, when his mind felt heavy, on weekends, when time stretched endlessly with nothing to fill it, Kaito began to notice a pattern. It wasn't the habit calling him. It was something underneath it. So he returned to the temple once more. "This isn't about the habit, is it?" Kaito asked. The monk looked at him, a faint smile forming. "No," he said. "It never was." Kaito sat down slowly. "Then what is it?" The monk didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "When the urge comes, what are you feeling before it?" Kaito paused. He had never asked himself that. He closed his eyes, replaying the moments. The silence, the restlessness, the subtle discomfort he couldn't name. "Empty," Kaito said quietly. The monk nodded. "Most habits are not addictions," he said. "They are solutions." Kaito looked up. "Solutions to what?" "To what you are avoiding," the monk replied. The words hit deeper than anything before, because suddenly, everything made sense. The habit wasn't the problem. It was the escape, an answer to something Kaito had never faced directly. "You don't remove the escape by force," the monk continued. "You remove the need for escape." Kaito sat there, absorbing it. That night, when the urge came again, he didn't just observe. He asked, "What am I trying to avoid right now?" And for the first time, he didn't run from the answer, because the real shift wasn't in controlling the habit anymore. It was in finally seeing why it existed at all. Chapter 7. The End of the Fight. Something changed in Kaito after that realization. He stopped seeing himself as someone trying to quit. He stopped labeling his behavior as good or bad. And most importantly, he stopped fighting. At first, it felt unnatural. For years, his identity was built on resistance, on discipline, on the idea that strength meant control and control meant force. But now, there was no force, only awareness, and something unexpected began to happen. Without the constant pressure, the habit started to weaken. Not dramatically, not overnight, but quietly, almost invisibly. Days would pass where the urge didn't come at all, and when it did, it felt distant, less urgent, less convincing. Kaito noticed something else too. The moments that used to trigger the habit no longer had the same power, because he was no longer avoiding them. When silence came, he stayed with it. When discomfort appeared, he allowed it. When restlessness surfaced, he explored it. There was nothing left to escape from, and without escape, the habit had no purpose. One evening, sitting alone in his room, Kaito looked at his phone on the table. It was there, unchanged, available, but for the first time, it meant nothing. No pull, no tension, no internal negotiation, just an object. He didn't feel strong. He didn't feel proud. He felt free. The next day, he returned to the temple one last time. "I think it's gone," Kaito said. The monk shook his head gently. "Nothing truly disappears," he replied. "It simply loses its place in your life." Kaito stood there, understanding, because the goal was never to destroy the habit, it was to grow beyond it. And once you do, there is nothing left to fight, only a quiet mind that no longer needs to escape. Chapter 8. The Path You Choose. Months passed, and if you had met Kaito then, you wouldn't have noticed anything extraordinary. He still lived in the same place, worked the same job, followed the same routines. But internally, everything was different. There was no more tension between who he was and who he wanted to be. No more quiet battles in the background of his mind. No more exhausting cycle of control, failure, and guilt. Because the fight was gone. And without the fight, there was nothing left to lose. One evening, as the sun faded behind the buildings, Kaito sat by his window, holding a cup of tea. The same moment that once triggered his habit, the same silence, the same stillness. But now, it felt peaceful, not empty, not something to escape from, just complete. He thought back to the person he used to be, someone who believed that change required force. That discipline meant pushing harder, that control came from resisting every urge. But now he understood something deeper. Control was never about suppression, it was about awareness. Because when you truly see something clearly, you no longer need to fight it. The next morning, Kaito returned to the temple, not because he needed answers, but because he wanted to say thank you. The monk was there, as always, sweeping the ground. Kaito bowed. "It worked," he said simply. The monk nodded, not surprised. "Of course it did," he replied. Kaito hesitated for a moment, then asked one final question. "What if the habit comes back?" The monk placed the broom down and looked at him. "Then you watch it again. No fear, no urgency, no complexity, just the same simple path." Kaito smiled, because he finally understood. This was never a one-time victory. It was a way of living, a way of meeting every urge, every emotion, every moment, with presence instead of resistance. So now, the question is not whether you can break your habits. The question is, are you willing to stop fighting long enough to understand them? If you are, comment yes below, because the path is simple, but only for those who are ready to walk it. Closing, the choice is yours. At the end of all this, nothing about your life may look different. You will still wake up in the same room, face the same responsibilities, encounter the same triggers, the same emotions, the same moments of weakness. But something inside you can be completely transformed, because now you understand. You understand that your habits are not enemies to destroy. They are signals. They are patterns that once served you and stayed long after they were needed. And the moment you stop fighting them, you begin to see them clearly, not as something powerful, but as something temporary, something that rises and falls, just like every thought, every emotion, every urge you've ever had. So here is what you do next. Tomorrow, when the urge comes back, and it will, don't panic, don't resist, don't try to prove anything. Just pause, notice it, feel it, watch how it moves through you, and give yourself just a few minutes without reacting. That's all it takes to begin. Not a complete transformation, not a perfect system, just one moment of awareness, then another, and another. This is how change actually happens, quietly, gradually, without force. Because real discipline is not about controlling yourself. It's about understanding yourself. And once you understand, you no longer need to fight. So now, the decision is yours. Will you keep running in the same cycle? Or will you finally stop and observe? If you're ready to try this a different way, comment, "I'm ready," below. Because this path doesn't require you to become someone new. It only asks you to become aware of who you already are.